Well, I have Life360. I have it for me, my wife, my mother, and all of my children. And I will tell you from personal experience that Life360 is not always 100% accurate 100% of the time. Okay? It's not. None of those devices are. I mean, the accuracy depends on, their signal strength, their connection, what's going on inside the app at the time, how many people are nearby, sucking up bandwidth. I mean, all those things come into play. What's good, people? I'm attorney John Mobley. I have prosecuted and litigated complex civil and criminal cases for over 30 years, and I'm still actively litigating these cases today. My experience was forged in the legal trenches, going toe-to-toe with some of the best lawyers in the country, and I'm still actively litigating these cases. On this podcast, I'll be giving no-holds-barred, hard-hitting legal analysis on the legal issues that are gripping the nation. But you want to hear more than just legalese or legal mumbo-jumbo. It's important to have the perspective of a non-lawyer. So my assistant Kayla is joining me in the podcast, and she's going to ask me the tough questions for which you want the answers. So please join me on Legal Deep Dives and listen to me call it like I see it. What's good, people? Well, we're going to continue my discussion about the Nolan Wells criminal investigation. And, the last time I got a little excited, and I tend to get a tad loquacious, and the production team pulled out the samurai sword and cut me in half to make this a two-parter. So now we're going to pick up where I left off with part 2.
Staying on that same kind of topic with the phone, what about GPS or Life360? Is there anything that they've looked into with that so far?
Again, it's sort of the same thing. The parents will get up there. I mean, and I want to be clear, I'm not trying to attack the parents. They're grieving. They want answers, which they have. Number one, it's understandable they want answers. And number two, they're entitled to answers. So I want to be clear, I'm not attacking them for handling this the best way that they can. There's no playbook, there's no playbook for how you should act if your child gets killed. Okay? Mm-hmm. I mean, no one can, you can sit there and say, don't do this, don't do that up. But until that happens to you, you don't have any idea how you're going to respond. You want answers, you're grieving, you're mad, you're outraged, you're suspicious. So you're going to get out there and say things, and, everybody's sticking cameras in your face and give you an opportunity to say what's on your mind, and you want to say your truth and say how you feel, and you're going to say stuff. So on some level, I do understand that, and I'm not attacking them or beating them up for that. I'm just saying that big picture wise, now that they have counsel in particular, it's irresponsible to put things out there that are not necessarily corroborated by evidence. So let's talk about the GPS tracking, because there's talk about that. I believe his mother talked about how she looked at Life360, and Life360 says at this time this and this time that location, and that doesn't add up. Well, I have Life360. I have it for me, my wife, my mother, and all of my children. And I will tell you from personal experience that Life360 is not always 100% accurate 100% of the time. Okay? It's not. None of those devices are. I mean, the accuracy depends on, their signal strength, their connection, what's going on inside the app at the time, how many people are nearby, sucking up bandwidth. Mm-hmm. I mean, all those things come into play. And somebody reading what their phone says, the app says, that's not reliable evidence. Okay? What would be reliable is a forensic download of the phone to kind of show, where it was pinging and things like that. And if you don't believe that, if you think that that's just lawyer speak, I challenge anyone to get on their phone and download or 3 or multiple different navigation or guidance apps. Get in your car, take a location, maybe one like an hour and a half away, put in that address, put it in 2 or 3 different apps, Google Maps, whatever the map, the map app on your iPhone. Those are 2 separate map applications. If your car has a guidance system or GPS navigation, put it in there, And I will guarantee you will get 3 different routes to your location most of the time, and you will have 3 different travel times. They will not all say the same. And it's not because they're not all working properly, but they're different operating systems, and they use different data to calculate and formulate their information. Mm-hmm. Okay, so all that, just somebody reading it, is not 100% accurate. Okay, I mean, what would make that accurate is hiring an expert to, conduct a data download of the phone. Okay, see where it's pinging, see what towers it's hitting. That's how you're really going to determine that accuracy. Mm-hmm. Okay, and you need experts and professionals to do that. I mean, again, the parents, while they're well-meaning, and it may explain why they believe what they believe, what they're saying about the photos, the phone, that photo of him and the 3 white kids, all these things put together out of context, that perpetuates a false narrative. Mm-hmm. And I think that is one of the issues in the case, And again, I'm not saying that he was not murdered, okay? But I think these things taken out of context suggest that he was when he may not have been, And along those same lines, I do not agree with the reward. Al Sharpton, and I say the reward, Al Sharpton has stated he would give a $50,000 reward to anyone that provided information that led to the arrest and conviction involving Nolan Wells. And Tyler Perry doubled that, so now it's $100,000. And while I believe their intentions are noble, I think that, again, that's misleading, because what they're suggesting is, the implication is there was definitely a crime. Mm-hmm. Okay, and there may not be a crime. It's one thing to say, hey, we're posting a reward for information leading to, the truth or information about what happened to him. That's something different. Okay, but I think what's going to happen is you're going to get people that create false information to try to, suggest that a crime was, or establish a crime was committed. Mm-hmm. And I really think a better use of that money would be to, hey, listen, and I get it. I mean, I don't trust every law enforcement investigation. Okay, when I have clients in criminal cases, I cannot tell you how many times I have found out information and uncovered information that law enforcement did not uncover. Mm-hmm. Either A, because they were biased. Yes, there is bias in investigations. Whether you're black, white, male, female, oftentimes, and I've been saying it for years, law enforcement, these men that wear the badges, these men that are investigators, they are human just like everybody else. And for them to say they don't have biases, they're lying. Okay? Whether they do have biases, and how that bias affects the investigation is they have an idea of what probably happened based on their hunches, based on their experience, and they'll say they go where the evidence takes them, but they're kind of controlling what evidence they look at, okay, and what evidence they ignore, okay? And typically what bias does in investigation is how it allows the investigators to kind of pick and choose which evidence they believe is relevant. Mm-hmm. And they will typically focus on the evidence that confirms their bias about the status of the case, okay, whether or not they think a crime occurred or not. So there have been plenty of times where I've got private investigators that I've directed them to talk to certain witnesses, to investigate certain data, look for cameras, examine these phones, and I've been able to determine facts and evidence law enforcement missed. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm not saying that law enforcement is perfect. I'm not saying that their investigation was objective and thorough. What I'm saying is that instead of putting up money for a reward and getting random people to make calls and things like that, you use that money to hire your own team. You can hire multiple private investigators to conduct witness interviews, do phone downloads, check for cameras. I would even say, for example, off the top of my head, I would even, try to do a facial recognition sweep on social media. I don't think it's unlikely or out of the realm of possibility that his photo is on somebody's social media page. And when I say that, I think it would be done inadvertently. People are taking photos. Mm-hmm. They're on the water, they're having a good time, and they may not have been focusing on him, but he may be in the background of somebody's photos. And people are posting photos on, Facebook, all the social media apps, Instagram, and I would even run that on the internet to see if we could find something. I mean, there are things that they could do to conduct their own independent investigation, and they can have those investigators answer to them directly. As opposed to having questions about the reliability, the transparency, the thoroughness. I think that's a much better use of that money than putting out rewards trying to seek information to establish a crime occurred when it may not have occurred.
And so going back to his parents, what else have they come out and said that would be important or something that would help kind of put a little bit of perspective on the case?
Something they said they believe is important is that they don't believe their son would ever leave the group he was with. And the reason they say that is because they say they've always told him, you go with who you leave with who you went with. They preach that. They told him that all the time. That's not what they taught him. Well, I believe them when they say that's what they taught him and that's what they told him. And it's admirable and smart that they told him that. However, I think it is naive, and I'm a parent, I think it is naive for any parent to believe that their child does what they tell them to do 100% of the time without fail. That's just not realistic. Okay? So again, I don't put a whole lot of value in that statement that they don't believe he would leave the group he was with because that's not what they taught him to do. Well, he's 18. He's going to do what he wants to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Without worrying about what mommy and daddy told him to do. So, again, I know they have the best of intentions. They have every reason to and every right to question what they hear, but
Yeah. Adding on to the documents, what about the autopsy?
Yeah, and when you say the autopsy, there are technically two autopsies.
Okay.
Okay. There's the autopsy that was completed by law enforcement and the private autopsy. And when I say completed by law enforcement, it wasn't 100% complete. It was partially complete because there are multiple components to an autopsy. Typically what you're going to have, depending on how thorough you're going to want to get, is you have the forensic pathologist to examine the body. And you're looking, they take out the liver, they look for signs of trauma, whether it be, obviously, things like, gunshot wounds, skin penetration that would indicate, knife penetration wounds. How deep are they? Are they shallow? Are they deep? They penetrate organs. Is there hemorrhaging, which is a fancy word for bleeding? Okay. Whether or not there's evidence of blunt force trauma, whether there's evidence of bruising, and then of course they get typically a second part done by orthopedic anthropologists or forensic anthropologists to examine the skeletal structure, because that's a whole different area, examining the skeletal structure for trauma. Okay, whether or not there are broken bones in the neck, that would be consistent with, strangulation. Whether or not there's trauma to the skull, like a fracture, that would indicate that person was struck in the head. And even when you have injuries on the skeletal structure, they have to be aged. Okay, and when I say that, just because someone has a fracture or skeletal trauma does not mean it's related to the cause of death. For example, and I'm not saying this is the case. I'm just giving this as an example. This young man played football. Okay. He played in games. He played in practices. That is a contact sport. Okay. It is certainly reasonable for him to have injuries on various parts of his body because he played football. Okay. So they could conduct an autopsy and see all kind of injuries to the skeletal structure, but they can determine when some are older, for example, and you'll see skeletal injuries in different stages of healing. Okay, that means they're older and they occurred at different times, not just at one time. You can tell if there's bruising. You can tell if the bruising occurred before or after death because of the way the blood pools and things like that. And I'm not an expert, but I've tried a lot of these cases. I've tried a lot of violent crimes involving adults, involving children, I've had to read a lot of autopsy reports and forensic reports. And of course, what's important, which they didn't do in this case, and this is what I have a problem with the private autopsy, the family through their attorney had a private autopsy conducted. And what they did, and I'll get back to what I'm saying about what's important in a second, what they did, they called the press conference a dog and pony show, because I thought it went on well beyond the scope of what it was supposed to be for, to release the autopsy results. But they had a press conference to release the autopsy report. And they blew it up, and they should have used the PowerPoint or projection, but they blew it up and put it on poster board. And as much as I respect Ben Crump and all he's accomplished as a civil rights attorney, much more than I could ever hope to accomplish in my career, from a professional technical standpoint, he was not the right guy to publish those results from the autopsy. He wasn't prepared. He's talking about words that he could barely pronounce. And the biggest thing more than that is, an autopsy report has a lot of medical and forensic terms, okay? And if you don't have a qualified person to interpret what those terms mean in the context of whether or not this is related to, the death or consistent with foul play, then what you're going to have is, and this happened on Nancy Grace. Nancy Grace was hemmed up on something he read about, deep soft tissue injury, blood, redness. She was hung up on that. But she didn't know what that meant. And like I was telling her, that didn't necessarily mean anything. She's trying to suggest that meant he got hit behind and that was evidence of foul play, but that's not what that meant necessarily. It just meant, soft tissue is like muscle. That means nothing broken. They did not say hemorrhaging, which means there was no blood. They did not say bruising. They said just redness. Well, hell, that can mean anything. But the problem is when you put that out there, all these terms out there, people are going to think that these terms sound suspicious, like they're somehow related to what happened to them. And again, this false narrative continues to get perpetuated. And if it was me, what I do when I have a private autopsy or private evaluation done, the first thing I do is I talk to my expert and say, tell me what this means. Does this mean there's evidence of foul play? Does this mean that somebody struck him? They may say yes. They may say no. That can mean any number of things. That could have been sinus infection. That could have been sunburn. That could have been where the football helmet was riding in too deep. Those are the questions you ask. Okay, because that's reliable evidence when you have the expert telling you what these things can mean and what they don't mean. Okay, and the problem is they didn't do any of that. They just got the support and put it up there, and ultimately said cause of death, manner of death undetermined. And one of the reasons the autopsy was incomplete is because some of the skeletal structure in the neck and spine were not turned over during the autopsy, and that was not malicious, but there are different components to it. They turn over the body, but not certain parts. Well, but my thing is, if it was me, I would not have released an incomplete autopsy. I would have said, hey, Sheriff, my expert needs the spine, the neck bones. Whatever they need. How about, let us examine that.
Yeah.
That's what you do.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's do a final wrap up and see what your, final thoughts are. Anything else you want to add? And
we're still missing toxicology. Okay. Toxicology means a test of what was in your blood. Looking for alcohol, looking for drugs. We don't have that yet either. I'm surprised that we don't have that. That doesn't take very long. I'm surprised the parents didn't do the tox screen as well, because that's part of it. You want to test that blood as well to see what was in his system. And I want to be clear, I think it's likely, which is fine, there's alcohol in the system. That's not a problem, even though he's underage, whatever. People at a party are going to drink, okay? But, was there drugs in his system? If so, what drugs? If so, what level? That's why toxicology is important. And that's why getting all the pieces together are important. But, I'm going to call it like I see it. I think this is a horrible case. I can understand why there are a lot of questions, why there's a lot of mistrust, and why people want answers. However, I also think this case epitomizes why there must be a balance between transparency in law enforcement investigations, but also law enforcement exercising discretion in what information is released and when it's released. Because again, like I indicated earlier, when information is released in pieces, without context, without explanation, without being put together with all the other evidence, in today's age, with social media and podcasts and the 24-hour news cycle, it's going to perpetuate a false narrative that's going to continue to gain traction irrespective of whether or not it's true. And that doesn't serve anyone. I want to be clear. I'm not saying he has been murdered and there has been a crime. And I'm not saying there has not been. What I'm saying is all the evidence needs to be taken into context in order to make that determination. That is the deal. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there that do not like what I'm saying. Now, as you can probably imagine, I really do not give a damn. However, I do want to hear what you think. I do want to hear your comments. I know some people think there's a conspiracy and it's a cover-up. Other people think it's being taken out of context and blown out of proportion. Do me a favor, post your comments, call it like you see it. That's it.